motor pool smelled like grease and burnt rubber. Marcus Webb crouched beneath a Humvee, wrench in hand, invisible to everyone who walked past. A young lieutenant stopped, looked down, and laughed. "Hey, old man," he said, loud enough for the whole bay to hear. "You missed a spot." The laughter that followed echoed off the concrete walls. Marcus didn't look up. He just kept turning the wrench, slow, steady, like a man who had heard far worse in places no one in that motor pool would ever see. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Marcus Webb was 53 years old, and he looked every year of it. His hands were rough, the kind of rough that didn't come from a garage. His face carried lines that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with what he had seen. He walked with a slight drag in his left leg, a souvenir from a rooftop in Kabul that no official report had ever mentioned. At Fort Caldwell, he had been assigned to the motor pool for 11 months. No one had asked him much about his past. He had offered even less. To the soldiers who passed through the bay every morning, Marcus was simply the mechanic, the quiet one, the one who showed up before anyone else and left after everyone had gone. He never raised his voice, he never complained. He fixed what needed fixing and said nothing about the rest. The younger soldiers had given him a nickname within his first week: Grandpa. They said it the way people say things when they don't expect to be corrected. Marcus never corrected them. He just handed back their vehicles on time every time, without a word about how he had done it. But there were small things, details that didn't quite fit. The way his eyes moved when a new convoy arrived, scanning the vehicles before the drivers had even stepped out. The way he could identify an engine fault by sound alone, standing 20 feet away, not looking up from whatever he was working on. The way certain visiting officers, men with quiet authority and no name tags, would slow their walk when they passed the motor pool. Not stopping, just slowing, as if they had noticed something. No one at Fort Caldwell connected those moments. No one was looking for a pattern. To them, Marcus Webb was background noise, a useful, forgettable fixture of the base, a man whose name would never appear on a commendation or a deployment order again. They thought they knew his story. They had no idea it was still being written. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after a young corporal named Danny Reyes had decided that mocking Marcus was a reasonable way to pass the time. It had started small. A comment about the way Marcus walked, a joke about his age tossed across the bay for the entertainment of whoever was nearby. Reyes was 22, fast-talking, convinced that loudness was the same thing as confidence. The other mechanics laughed at his jokes because it was easier than not laughing. Marcus said nothing. He absorbed it the way stone absorbs rain, without reaction, without acknowledgement. He simply kept working. The Tuesday, a senior logistics officer arrived at the motor pool with a problem. A specialized military vehicle, an armored communications unit, had developed a fault that 2 certified technicians had spent 3 days failing to diagnose. It was scheduled for deployment in 48 hours. The officer was not calm about it. He explained the symptoms to the lead mechanic, who nodded seriously and said he would get his best people on it. Reyes cracked a joke under his breath. A few people smirked. Marcus set down his wrench and walked over. He didn't ask permission. He crouched beside the vehicle, placed one hand flat against the frame, and was quiet for a moment. Then he stood, reached into the engine compartment with the certainty of someone who had done this 100 times in conditions far worse than a clean motor pool bay, and made 2 adjustments. The vehicle started on the first try. The logistics officer stared. "How long have you been working on these systems?" he asked. Marcus picked up his rag and wiped his hands. "A while," he said, and walked back to his station. Reyes didn't make a joke that time. For the first time since Marcus had arrived, the bay was completely quiet. The second crack was harder to explain away. A security exercise ran on a Thursday night, the kind designed to test base protocols under pressure. Simulated breach, scrambled response teams, a controlled dose of chaos to see where the gaps were. Standard procedure. Most of the base treated it as an inconvenience. Marcus was not supposed to be involved. He was motor pool, support staff. He had no role in the exercise scenario. But when the simulated breach reached the communications block and the response team found themselves unable to advance because of a jammed security gate, it was Marcus who appeared at the edge of the corridor. He hadn't been called. He hadn't been assigned. He was simply there. He looked at the gate once. He looked at the panel beside it. He said quietly to the team leader, "Third relay switch. It's been cycling wrong for 2 weeks. Someone submitted a work order. It got buried." He opened the panel, made a single adjustment, and the gate released. The team leader, a staff sergeant named Hollins, looked at him the way people look at things they can't file properly in their minds. "How did you know about that relay?" she asked. Marcus shrugged. "I read the work orders," he said. He walked away before she could ask anything else. Hollins mentioned it to her superior the next morning. Her superior mentioned it to someone else. The story passed upward through the base the way unusual things do, quietly, person to person, until it reached someone who knew to pay attention. What would you have done if you had been watching? Would you have laughed with the others, or would you have noticed the stillness behind his eyes, the way he never looked surprised, the way he always seemed to know what was coming before it arrived? The base commander at Fort Caldwell was Colonel James Archer, a man who had built his career on reading people accurately and moving quickly once he had. When the name Marcus Webb was brought to his attention for the 3rd time in 2 weeks, he did something unusual. He pulled the file himself. What he found was a personnel record so clean it was almost suspicious. Dates of service, assignments, evaluations, all standard, all correct, all completely unremarkable. Colonel Archer had been around long enough to know what an unremarkable file sometimes meant. He made a call to a contact in Washington. The contact was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, very carefully, "Where did you say he was assigned?" Archer told him. Another silence, longer this time. "Colonel," the contact said, "I would strongly recommend treating that individual with the same courtesy you would extend to a 3-star general. I am not able to say more than that." Archer sat with that information for a full day before he acted on it. When he did, he walked to the motor pool himself. No staff, no announcement. Just the colonel, alone, crossing the base in the late afternoon heat. Marcus was underneath a vehicle when Archer arrived. He didn't come out immediately. He finished what he was doing, set down his tools, and emerged slowly, wiping his hands on a cloth. He looked at the colonel without surprise, as if he had expected this visit, or one like it eventually. Archer extended his hand. "I owe you an apology," he said, "on behalf of this command." Marcus looked at the hand for a moment. Then he shook it. "No apology needed, sir," he said. "I'm just doing my job." Archer studied him. "Can I ask what your job actually is?" Marcus smiled just slightly, the first real smile anyone at Fort Caldwell had seen from him. "Right now," he said, "fixing vehicles." The truth came out the following week, not through an announcement or a ceremony, but through the quiet mechanics of a world that runs on classified clearances and careful conversations. A federal vehicle arrived at the base. 2 men in civilian clothes stepped out, walked directly to the motor pool, and spoke to Marcus in low voices for 11 minutes. No one else could hear what was said. When the conversation ended, they shook his hand, returned to their vehicle, and left. Marcus stood in the bay doorway for a moment, watching them go. Then he turned back to the vehicle he had been working on and picked up his wrench. It was Reyes who finally asked. He had been watching from across the bay, his earlier confidence entirely gone, replaced by something he couldn't quite name. "Webb," he said carefully. "Who were those guys?" Marcus didn't look up. "Old colleagues," he said. "From where?" A pause. The wrench turned once. "Doesn't have a public address," Marcus said. Reyes opened his mouth, closed it, sat down on a toolbox and said nothing else. The full picture emerged gradually, the way it always does when the people involved don't speak and the records don't exist. Marcus Webb had spent 21 years as a CIA field operative, working primarily in Central Asia and the Middle East. He had been embedded in environments where his cover required him to be invisible, to maintain false identities for years at a time, to blend into backgrounds so thoroughly that even the people around him forgot he was there. He had helped dismantle weapons pipelines. He had extracted individuals whose survival depended on no one knowing they had been found. He had operated in conditions where a single mistake meant not coming home, and he had made very few mistakes. The bad knee was from a rooftop in Kabul. The quiet was from everywhere else. When he retired from active operations, he had been given options: a desk role, an advisory position, a comfortable disappearance into civilian life. He had chosen instead to spend a year in a motor pool at Fort Caldwell, doing work that needed doing, staying connected to the world he had given his life to in the only way that felt honest to him. He had not asked for recognition. He had not wanted it. He had wanted exactly what he had gotten: a bay to work in, vehicles to fix, and the clean simplicity of useful work at the end of a complicated life. What he had not wanted was the mockery. But he had absorbed that too, the way he had absorbed everything else, without complaint, without reaction, without giving anyone the satisfaction of knowing it landed. The last day anyone at Fort Caldwell underestimated Marcus Webb was a Friday in early autumn. A ceremony had been arranged, not at Marcus's request, but at Colonel Archer's insistence. Not a large one, not public. Just the base personnel gathered in the motor pool bay, the place where all of it had happened, standing in the grease-stained light of a room that smelled like oil and hard work. Archer spoke briefly. He said that Fort Caldwell had been privileged to have in its presence a man whose service to the country extended far beyond anything printed on any record available to any of them. He said that the courage it took to be invisible, to do the work no one thanks you for, and survive the things no one writes about, was a different kind of courage than the kind celebrated on parade grounds. But it was courage nonetheless, perhaps more so. He turned to Marcus and saluted. The room followed. Every soldier, every technician, every clerk who had walked past the motor pool for 11 months without looking raised their hand. Reyes, standing in the back, brought his hand up slowly, and when it reached his forehead, it stayed there longer than regulation required. Marcus stood in the center of it all, still in his work clothes, wrench in his jacket pocket, and returned the salute with the quiet precision of a man who had earned it in rooms no one would ever see. He didn't make a speech. He didn't need to. He just nodded once, turned back to the vehicle he had been working on, and picked up his wrench. Some men spend their lives being seen. Others spend theirs making sure they aren't. Both require a kind of strength, but only one of them demands that you carry everything alone in silence, without ever asking for the credit that was always yours to claim. Marcus Webb was that kind of man, the kind the world forgets to honor until it is almost too late. The kind who fixes what is broken and walks away before anyone thinks to say thank you. If this story moved you, don't forget to show your support. Subscribe for more military and veteran stories. We bring you true tales of courage, sacrifice, and honor. Stories that remind us of the quiet strength carried by those who serve. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and never forget the heroes among us.